Welcome, everybody, to Surprising Obstacles to Outstanding Customer Service. I'm your webinar facilitator today, Jeff Toyster, and I'm very excited to have all of you here on the live webinar, as well as those of you who are tuning in via the webinar replay. So we're going to have a lot of fun today, and that's one of the things I want to warn you up front is we're going to be a little interactive. I don't want to just tell you about these obstacles. I want to show you. That little picture you can see on my slide there, that's a slot canyon not too far from my home in San Diego, California, out in the desert. And one of the things I like about slot canyons and why they're fun to explore is they look intriguing, but you never know what's right around the corner. And I think that's what our webinar will be like today. You're going to gain something interesting, I hope, something useful, but you never know what's around the corner. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to tell you, kind of why am I doing this webinar right now? And it's really in service of my new book, Getting Service Right. It's a second edition. The first edition was called Service Failure. And the second time around, I get a chance to redo the title. It's part of getting service right for me. The service failure title didn't work. So that book's coming out on April 2nd. And the book's all about obstacles that are hidden or even counterintuitive that our employees face to customer service. So I'm doing the webinar today to give you a sneak preview of some of these obstacles, and we'll get to experience them together. If you are watching this webinar after April 2nd, the book is on sale. If you're watching the webinar live, I've got the first copy right here. Very excited. And slowly but surely, there's some early links coming up on Amazon, but the official launch is April 2nd. If you go to that website, though, you can download the first chapter right now if you're interested in checking out the book. Okay, so let's talk about some of these obstacles, and I want to give you an example of an obstacle. I recently had to deal with some year-end payroll types of things, and occasionally I'll hire a contractor to help me out. And one of my contractors did not receive their 1099 form. If you're not familiar with this, just a form that the US government requires companies like mine to send out to contractors who are not employees, but have done business with your company in some way. So I sent out 1099 forms, yet one of my contractors doesn't get one. So I contact customer service for my payroll provider and say, hey, what's going on? And what's kind of fascinating about this is no matter what I try to describe, the person could not understand me. I kept saying my priority as the customer is to make sure my 1099 gets to my contractor. It's a requirement. You were supposed to do this. I need you to do this, please. And what the person who was supporting me kept working on was trying to figure out what went wrong. And it was a weird kind of tension because I would say, let's find out what went wrong later. That's fine, I'll help with that. But right now, the 1099, that is the most important thing. And they, for some reason, kind of refuse to hear it. Now, why does that happen? Why do people who are probably really good at their jobs struggle with listening? Well, there turns out to be a reason or an explanation. And I'll give you a hint. Now, if you can read this, I've covered up half the letters here, but if you can read this in the chat box, just type that in and tell me what you think this says. This is my hint as to why it was hard for the person to understand what I needed. All right. And if you're tuning in via the replay, what everybody's typing in is the same thing right now. Experience is everything. So the cool thing is our brains have this really nice ability to process parts of information and compare it to familiar patterns and then fill in the blank. So in this case, you see maybe a little more than half of the letters, but your brain says, that's a pretty familiar pattern. I get it. I got it under control. Let me tell you what the rest of it says. And then all of you were able to say, experience is everything. Now that's exactly what the rep who was helping me was dealing with. I was explaining to her, hey, I have this issue with the 1099, and her brain was filling in the rest of the story. Oh, that means I have to find out why the 1099 wasn't issued. The problem with this little function in our brain is sometimes it's inaccurate. It jumps to a conclusion that's not the right conclusion, or it's an unexpected conclusion. And here's the hard part about it. It's instinctive. In other words, our brains will stop listening and jump to the conclusion as soon as we think we know the rest of the answer. And so that's what was happening to this rep who was helping me that day. She kept jumping to the wrong conclusion, and that instinct was preventing her from listening to me. It's the first obstacle I want to share with you today, is that instinct we all have, and the more experience we have, the more the obstacle becomes prevalent. It prevents us from being really good listeners. So how do we overcome that? Well, the interesting thing about this is making sure that we slow down a little bit and use our listening skills that I'm sure that all of you have. The challenge, though, is it's the instinct. It's not that we don't know how to listen. It's the instinct that shuts down listening. So you have to be aware when your brain is wanting you to jump to conclusions, what you should do instead is push pause on that instinct and try to listen. So just to prove that I know all of you already know some of the basics of listening, if you'd use the chat box, share with me one skill that you know how to use to listen to your customers. So I'll be quiet for just about 30 seconds. And as we're going through this, these are all excellent suggestions. Stop multitasking. Give the person your full attention. Try paraphrasing or repeating back. Pause and just let them finish. Trying to remove distractions. So all of these fantastic examples to show you know how to listen. Yet I'm willing to bet that all of you on the webinar today, and myself included, there are times when that instinct takes over and we have to fight the instinct a little bit. Now, if you're a leader of customer service employees, this is something that you should look at as well. As if you see your employees doing a poor job listening, it might not be that they don't know how to listen. There might be something that's getting in the way, like this instinct that causes us to jump to conclusion. All right. So that's the first obstacle that I want to share with you. Now, I do want to pause for a moment. I'm going to share a few more obstacles with you today. And at any time, if you have questions, you want me to pause and maybe go deeper, I invite you to do that. I'll also take some time at the end of the webinar to answer your questions as well. So again, I want to make this as interactive as possible and as useful to you as we possibly can. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Here's a little challenge for you, and if you will, see if you can fill in the blank. I've given you 2 words here, and see if you can fill in the blank. If you're using the chat box, just type the whole word. Justin, you got that? Laura, you got that? Okay. And I don't want to say it out loud just yet. I'll give you a few more seconds to type it in. Looks like everybody's got this, and you're absolutely correct. Those are right on. So here's what's interesting. If you're watching the replay, I think you're only seeing what's on the screen. So what everybody is chatting is the same 2 words, sofa and soup. And those are perfectly acceptable, perfectly normal, perfectly reasonable answers to the question I asked, which is to fill in the blank. But I could have predicted that you would have written that. And some of you are thinking, well, yeah, because it's so easy. But think for a moment, those are not the only possible words. So S-O blank A, there's more than one word that could get you the correct answer, or I should say more than one letter that forms a correct word. The same with soup. There's more than one word, S-O blank P, that you could form. Yet I knew all of you would come up with sofa and soup. That's the thing that I want to share with you. So what is that? Well, let me jump to the contact center world for just a moment. And I know some of you are probably in the contact center world. And even if you're not, this is probably something you can relate to. There's a company called Mattersight, and a few years ago they did a study and they kind of wanted to find out what frustrates customers. And they discovered what most of us already know is when you call for customer service, the experience of calling is immensely frustrating. You get a prompt and then you have to maybe push 1 or 2 or 3 different menu items. Make sure you listen carefully because our menu has changed. Like we memorized the menu, of course not. So after kind of beeping through all these different menu items, then we get stuck in a loop where we hear the same hold music over and over and over again, as if to remind us you're on hold. So all of this becomes super frustrating. What Mattersight found is that 66% of callers are aggravated by the process. So by the time they get on the phone with a live person, whatever they were upset about has been amplified. This, and what I showed you earlier, is something called priming. So what happens is we can prime people to kind of move or think in one direction or another. By showing you the picture of a sofa, I was priming you to fill in the blank and make that word S-O blank A, sofa. By showing you the picture of a bowl of soup, I'm priming you to think that's the word I'm looking for, soup. And just like when a customer calls in and they have to go through multiple menu items and the whole process is frustrating, companies are accidentally priming customers to be angry. And we know that when customers get angry, a couple things happen. They get more judgmental, that's not good. And they also get less open to our ideas. And we need them to be open to our ideas so we can solve their problem. So what can we do about that? Well, one of the easiest solutions that you can focus on is by priming people towards more positive things, or at least priming them in the direction you want them to go. Let me give you an example. I'm giving you the same two words, SO blank A and SO blank P. This time I'm priming you with different images, and I want you to see if you can fill in the blank and guess what words I'm hoping you'll come up with now. For some of you, you're thinking, yeah, this is too easy. Exactly. So what am I looking for here? Soda and soap. So you got it. Absolutely. So notice, just by priming you a little bit, getting you to think in one direction or another, I get the result that I'm looking for, even when there's different possibilities. So in a customer service context, one of the things we can do is think about, some of you at the beginning of the webinar said, my role includes customer experience. Think about the friction points that happen before a customer actually interacts with a customer service employee. That's the customer experience part. If you can reduce friction, you will remove some of those negative primers. On the other hand, maybe you don't have control over that. So maybe you are on the other end of that call or face-to-face, and the person's already upset and there's nothing you can do about that. One of the ways that you can prime them to a more positive space, if you will, is by starting and using what I call the partner technique. We're accustomed to thinking that customer service interactions, especially when we're frustrated, are going to be very adversarial. And what you can do is instead use language, and if you're face-to-face, even body language, to show that you're on their side and say, you know what, understand that's a really difficult problem. Let's see if we can work together to resolve it. And just using that language sometimes can de-escalate people, make them feel a little bit better. And you can even prime them further and say, it sounds like you really did all you can here. And so you're validating their feelings, making them feel smart. Let's see if we can solve this issue, and we'll work together on that. So just by using certain language that's priming the customer that we're partnering, we're working together, can change the outcome and the way they relate to you. So think about priming, and an activity you can do is look at how you might be priming your customers for negative outcomes right now and see if you can switch that up a little bit. Okay, so I want to give you another example. And this one was kind of interesting. To me, it's fascinating what employees will share with me. When I'm a customer, I like to ask questions. And the other day I had to rent a car. My car was in the shop, so I had to rent a car for a couple of days. And the rental car company had someone come and pick me up and then bring me back to get my rental car. And our short drive over, maybe 5 minutes, I just started asking him questions. Yeah, tell me about your job. And it was really interesting because we had just met, and he's immediately telling me he doesn't like his job. He's unhappy. In fact, he's thinking about leaving. Now, I want to ask you a question. If you're the customer service leader, maybe you get wind of this. You have an unhappy employee, and they're thinking about leaving. What would you do? What would you do if you heard about that? Or maybe as a customer, I go and I tell the manager, I said, your employee there, not very happy. What would you do? I'm going to invite you to use the chat box again and just share what you think you might do to try to approach this issue. Now, while you're typing, I'll share with you that there's a lot of unhappy employees. There's a lot of unhappy customer service employees. And I talk to a lot of them. I experience service from a lot of them. And perhaps you do. So I wasn't surprised that this person was unhappy, but as you can imagine, there's always more to the story. So let's see what you have to say. Nicholas, I like that. Hopefully you would have caught that in a previous one-on-one, right? And a lot of you say that one-on-ones, like asking your employees, are you happy? What's going on? Um, that's a fantastic way. In fact, there's a concept called a stay interview. Often we'll hear about exit interviews. Someone quits and then we say, why are you leaving? But what if you ask employees, why are you staying? What's preventing you from leaving? You can often learn quite a lot. And so a lot of you are saying that, having that conversation, talking to that person. And that was interesting. Something that I did as a customer is just asking him. I found out two different things that were bothering him. One was he felt his voice wasn't being heard. He was talking about frustrations he had with the job. And one thing in particular, he said, we never have the right cars or enough cars, and our different locations are supposed to be sharing cars with each other. And that's not happening for some reason. I don't know why, but it makes my job a lot harder. So that was the first thing that he shared. That might be an actionable frustration, would probably improve customer service. The second thing he shared was more personal. He said, I have a young son, and frequently I'm asked to work unplanned overtime. It's mandatory unplanned overtime because something didn't get done or we got busy. And that's taking time away from spending the time that I could have been spending with my son. I'm now at work, and I kind of resent that. I'd like to be able to plan my schedule a little bit better. Two very, very specific things that this stranger shared with me in a 5-minute conversation. Now, for a lot of you saying having those one-on-ones, I think that's a big solution to that. But I'll tell you, a lot of leaders get caught up in jumping to conclusions, jumping to instincts. They'll say, well, we need to have an incentive program to get people happier. Let's do an engagement survey initiative, or we'll form a committee, or we need to have a contest or a game. In other words, they don't really ask the basic question a lot of you thought to ask. They jump to conclusions. Now, I want to kind of think about, why is that? Why do so many leaders, even really smart, good leaders, jump to conclusions? Well, let me demonstrate something to you. I've got two really simple problems up here on the screen, and I want you to see if you can come up with the answer, but I don't want you to spend any more than 30 seconds. So whatever your gut reaction that is the answer to these questions, see if you can tell me what you think the answer is. And try not to look at what everybody else is typing while you're doing that. All right, so we're getting some answers for the first question, and I also want you to think about the second question as well. Don't overthink this. Don't spend more than 30 seconds thinking about this. Just type in your answers. Most people are just answering the first one, and some people are a little upset with me right now because of all the math involved in today's webinar. I apologize for that. Okay, so we're getting some different answers here. And here's one of the challenges is our brains and our gut instincts sometimes are right on, but often they get confused really easily about the core essence of something. For example, how much does the ball cost? Our gut instinct tells us it's 10 cents, and the answer is 5 cents. Our gut instinct in the second problem is it's 100 minutes. The answer is 5 minutes. Now, the question is, why is that? What is it that causes most of us to jump to the wrong conclusion in certain situations? And it comes down to, we often jump to solutions before we understand the problem. Just like the manager of that car rental employee didn't really understand what was causing the employee to be unhappy, or even that the employee was unhappy. There's a lot of solutions jumping that goes on. In fact, I've seen this in companies and clients all the time, which is when we see a problem, instead of going and talking to our employees and saying, hey, what's going on? What are you seeing? Let's walk through this together. The leadership team gets together in a conference room and brainstorms ideas that may or may not be the right answer. So I don't like math that much, and I definitely don't like algebra. But here's one of the cool things about process first and then using the process to getting to a solution is, if you use the process, it will take slightly longer, but you have a way better chance of getting the right answer. So for those of you who may remember back in the day, a little bit of algebra with two different variables, this is how you would start approaching the equation. And it's helpful, at least, to find a way to get to the solution. Now, if I'm honest, I skipped the algebra on this one. And what I did is I tested my answers. Now, you played along and I appreciated that, which is I said, just give me 30 seconds, your gut instinct. That's not enough time to test your answers. But if I gave you more time and you said, okay, I think the ball cost 10 cents. What would be the total if the ball cost 10 cents and the bat costs $1 more? That would put the bat at $1.10. Oh, that doesn't work. So sometimes even if we jump to solutions, checking your work, checking your answers to see if it's right or not, as a leader, can help you avoid the big problem. The big problem to me is implementing the policy to the entire team and saying this is what we're doing from now on versus perhaps testing it first. So I go back to those employees, and I think a lot of you caught on to this, which is one-on-one having conversations with our employees. And I didn't ask you this question, but I would say we can go a bit further and say, if I really want to know what's bothering my employees, not only do I want to ask them, what the challenges are, maybe I can get their input on solutions. And they typically have really good ideas. They typically have figured out workarounds that are often really creative. And as a leader, I don't need to come up with all the ideas. I just need to figure out who has got the ideas and share them with people. But remember, our instinct as a leader sometimes is to jump to conclusions, and that's what causes some of the harm. Okay, I want to pause. I did say we'll take some questions as we go, and I'm very happy to do that. So I got a question here in the chat box, which is language useful in any culture? And in particular, here in Europe, customers are bored of bad customer service, and I think they do not want to lose their time helping the customer service team. And I'm wondering if the question here is really, is that why we're changing to different titles like customer experience, et cetera? You might be right. And I don't know from a customer's perspective how much it really matters what you call the team. I suspect, and I don't have research on this, but I suspect it matters less than the customer than it does to the company. In other words, the company's trying to give it a new name in hopes that the name will somehow change behavior. But if you don't do things in a fundamentally different way, the name by itself won't change anything. So I worry less about changing the name of the team and more so looking at the name of the functions of the team. For example, customer service teams, we talked about this a little earlier before the webinar was starting. A lot of customer service teams are calling themselves customer experience teams now, but they haven't changed at all what they're doing. And so that's not really customer experience, it's still customer service. So the customer, they're like, you can call yourself what you want. I'm getting the same experience and I'm getting the same service. I hope that answers your question. I don't really know, I don't have the data, but I suspect it's more about the company trying to help themselves feel a little bit better. I could be wrong. Okay, I want to give you another example here. And this is about how certain things can hide in plain sight. Now, the example I want to give you, and maybe this has happened to you before, where as a customer or maybe as a customer service leader, you see something that's totally obvious, yet the employee completely misses it. Or maybe you've missed something that later on you're like, how did I miss that? So in my case, I was checking into a hotel and my wife and I arrived just a little bit early and our room wasn't ready yet. So that's fine. The front desk associate said, it's going to be about 30 minutes before your room's ready. I'll let you know. That's fine. We'll go ahead and have a seat. We'll relax. It's a beautiful lobby. We're not in a big hurry. And that's what we did. We sat down, some nice comfy chairs right in front of the check-in desk, maybe 20 feet away. And so 30 minutes go by and we're kind of looking around like, oh, she's going to call us over. And she's super busy. So we figure, hey, she's working on stuff. She's answering the phone. She's talking to guests. She's working on her computer. She's talking to so many different things. She's really dialed in. She's super busy. 45 minutes go by and she hasn't called us over yet. Finally get out, we go over and talk to her and I said, hey, remember me? I'm just wondering if my room is ready. And I could tell instantly, the look in her eye, she had completely forgotten about us. And it turns out our room had been ready for quite some time. Now, how is that possible? How can you just hide in plain sight? We were directly in front of her. We just had that conversation. She said, I'll let you know. And then poof, we disappeared and she forgot all about us. Well, I want to do a little demonstration here, a little card trick, if you will. I'm going to show some cards on the screen. And what I want you to do is your eyes will naturally go somewhere. And it might be different for each of us on the webinar today, and that's okay. wherever your eyes naturally go, they're going to lock onto a card. I want you to stay focused on that card and memorize it, because I'm only going to show the cards on the screen for a few seconds. So here we go. Let me show you the cards. Lock onto whatever card comes to your attention. I want you to see it, memorize it, because then I will take the cards away. All right, find your card, concentrate it, see it, memorize it, and now I'm going to take the cards away. Okay, I want you to picture your card, and I want you to see your card in your mind's eye. If you memorized it, you should still be able to see kind of a vague image of your card. Now, here's my trick. I think I guessed which card you were going to look at and memorize, and I've removed that card now. I'm going to show some cards again. Your card will be gone. Okay, how did I do? Is your card gone? I imagine it is. Okay, so, and if you said nope, your card is definitely gone. I'm 100% certain of that. How do I know? Well, because all of the cards are gone. I took no chances whatsoever. None of the cards from the first example are in this one. So how did I do that? Now, some of you may have caught on to me very quickly. In my experience, most of us don't. And the reason is I guided you towards a phenomenon called inattentional blindness. So many of us know if you're multitasking, it's really hard to pay attention to people. But if you tunnel vision, focus on something, then you also miss things that should be really, really obvious. In fact, that's what the associate was doing in the hotel. She was tunnel vision on what was going on right in front of her, immediately in front of her. And as a result, she lost focus on the big picture, which was what's going on in the lobby. So that's how inattentional blindness works. If you want to have a lot of fun, maybe you've seen this before. I'm going to type this in the chat box. After the webinar, please go to YouTube and just search for Invisible Gorilla. You'll have some fun with inattentional blindness. Okay, so what's the solution? The solution to this is to proceduralize attention. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it feels like it should be, which is understand the time and place and when and how you should be paying attention. So as an example, you see two people meeting here, and the woman on the other side of the table, she's got her iPad maybe or device kind of pushed off to the side, and her body language is really focused at the person right in front of her. That's appropriate. In a meeting, that's what we should be doing. We should be focused in the meeting and focused on the person we're having a conversation with. But once that meeting ends, then we should probably have a procedure to maybe check our calendar, check our messages, check for things that may have changed and now demand our attention afterwards. So having a procedure of kind of when and how to pay attention can save us. Now, what would that look like in the hotel? In the hotel, what I would say is always pay attention to the guest right in front of you. So people coming to the check-in counter, if the phone rings, you got to take care of that. There's those moments in between guests. Rather than immediately going to her computer, which is what the associate was doing, she should have used what's known in hospitality as the 10 and 5 rule, which is just a quick scan of the area to look around. Is there anyone who needs my immediate assistance? If she had done that, she would have noticed us, and that would have been a prompt for her to go, better check on to see if their room is ready. So we can easily get sucked into not paying attention by paying too much attention, but the fix is to have kind of a procedure. Now, I'll give you a great place where you can notice this in action. If you ever go to Disneyland or Disney World, one of the things you'll notice is that people working the rides tend to stay in their shifts or their set position for only maybe 15, 20 minutes. And afterwards, they move somewhere else. Why is that? Because they all have a very distinct role to play, and they don't want people to get so tunnel vision on just pushing the button to let the ride go that they start missing important other details. So they have a procedure to shift people's attention throughout the day. Okay, I want to give you a quick survey here, and let's see if this will work. We've been interacting with each other a little bit today and hopefully having fun. Marcia, to answer your quick question, yes, the 10 and 5 rule. What that means is at 10 feet, you want to look for anybody 10 feet away from you and just make nonverbal contact with them, smile, wave, and at 5 feet, verbal contact. So if they're right in front of you, hello, how are you, good morning, etc. I like to expand that a little bit more. If you measure that out, that feels like it's a little close. So I tend to go 20 and 10, 20 feet away, 10 feet away, how are you? But it's known in the industry, in the hospitality industry, as the 10 and 5 rule. Thanks for that question. All right, let me launch the poll here. Hopefully this will come up. I'm going to launch the poll, and I'd like you to rate your own customer service knowledge on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being kind of beginner level, and 5 being expert. Like you really know a lot of stuff. And we're going to let this play out for just a moment. Just curious, I don't know if I've configured this. If you are on the webinar today in the chat box, can you see the results? Are you able to see the results as they come in? No, not able to see the results. Okay. Let us see if I can. I might have to just share those with you verbally. Okay, I'm going to give you just a couple more minutes to do that. And I have to get my calculator out because I'm doing a little bit of a calculation here. So bear with me while I'll give you another second to do the poll. And I promise to share the results with you, but I want to see how they come out first. Okay, so let's see. Bear with me just a sec. 2. All right. Ooh, final results. Okay. I know more math. And then I realized the calculation is going to be beyond me. So I'm going to kind of benchmark it. Let's see. No, math. Don't make me do it. All right. So I'm going to end the poll. And, oh, look, I can share the results now. Okay, here's what we said. Is most of you said, I'm going to give myself about a 4. A lot of you said a 3. No one said you're a beginner. That's fine. A couple of you said, like sort of beginner. One person said expert. Super cool. Okay. So we would say that I'm doing quick math here, but maybe like we'll give it like a 3.75. Just curious. Now, we've interacted with each other just a little bit on this webinar. And so this is kind of I understand this is going to be a tough one for you. But now, rather than rating yourself, I want you to rate the knowledge of the overall group. So you've had kind of a snapshot of the people who are participating via the chat box and kind of a vague sense of how much people might know about customer service. Take a moment, just gut instinct. There's no real right or wrong here. Let me know what you think the overall group might be in terms of their knowledge of customer service. And I'll give you just a few more seconds to do that, and then I'll share the poll. So Taffy saying, this is a little silly. How do we know? And it's a gut reaction. So none of this is scientific. Just like the first poll is not scientific. It's just your gut reaction. And I promise I'm going someplace with this that's really useful. Okay, I'm going to give you just a few more seconds to throw in your results here. Alexis, you were way too kind. Thank you. Okay, and Taffy's saying people are usually better than they think. Interesting. Okay, so I want to end the poll now. I'm going to share the results with you. Here is the fascinating part. Okay, I want you to think back to the first poll. 58% of you rated yourself a 4, and one person gave themselves a 1. About 22%, I think I got the percentage off slightly, but basically 4 was kind of where most people landed. And if we averaged it all out, it was like 3.75. On this poll, notice that we're a tick lower. 3 is by far the most popular one, and 4 was second, but no one said the group as a whole is expert. I think that's pretty reasonable. Why did I share this with you? Why did we do this poll? Because we just did a little experiment that's been replicated over and over and over again. So I'm going to move the poll again, and I want to bring this up here So what was the experience or experiment? There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this experiment we did, not entirely scientific, so it's a demonstration more than an experiment if you really want to get technical. But what it is we tend to generally overrate our knowledge in a particular area. And by overrating, if you think about this, if the typical person on this webinar said, I'm a 4, and then just a gut reaction guess, the group is a 3, we're saying, I'm better than the rest of the group. Now, some of you, that's true. If we actually did like a test, like a standardized customer service skills assessment or test, we would have probably a nice distribution of knowledge and skills. But each individual answer should then average out to about what the group kind of average is. Hopefully that makes sense. But what we're really saying is most of us are saying, I think I'm slightly better than everybody else. Not way better, but slightly. That's normal and it's natural. I hope you can understand while that might be true for some of you, it can't be true for all of us. We can't all be slightly better than the rest of the group. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. What the scientists, it's Dunning and Kruger, that's why they call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. They found that in a wide variety of topics that people tend to overestimate or overrate their knowledge. And it's the less you know, the more you tend to overrate yourself. So someone who's in the bottom 25% quartile, they really overrate their ability. If you're in the next quartile, a little bit less overrating. The only group that doesn't overrate their ability is the top quartile. The top 25% tends to underrate their ability, but everybody else overrates how much they might know. So how does this play into customer service? Well, one of the challenges we have is that employees classically overrate how much they know and how good they are. The good ones are kind of paranoid. And I imagine most of you are pretty good just by being on the webinar today. It just shows you're investing in yourself and your own development. That already gives you a notch up over the competition. But a lot of people are like, I'm awesome, even when they're not. So what do we do about this? What do we do about the Dunning-Kruger effect? Really, it's a calibration process. And what this means is we should start by having, this is what a good service experience should look like. And these are the right behaviors that we're looking for. As part of training, we should have every employee be able to demonstrate doing things the right way to prove not only that they've been well trained, but they're capable of doing the things that we want them to do. And we should, amongst in teams, make sure that we have a consistent definition of what great service looks like, what the right behaviors are, so that every time we're trying to coach someone, we have that calibration to go back to and can say, look, this is you at your best, and here's where you were in this interaction. Or this is you at doing a great job, and today you really stepped it up above and beyond, and we can compare that a little bit more objectively. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of customer service feedback is the feedback is just based on don't do this and next time do that, but we're not calibrating back to kind of a consistent standard. Hey, when we're trying to serve our customers, here's what we're always trying to do. If we don't have that standard, it's tough to continuously calibrate people back to. And so what happens is a lot of times employees think they're awesome even when they're not. And it's all of us are susceptible to it. It's a natural thing. But as leaders and even as individual contributors, you can help overcome that by having kind of an objective, this is what great service should look like. Okay, so I want to share, we're going to do some Q&A here in just a moment. I want to share a bonus resource with you. I'm going to share a workbook that I've used for many years. It's 10 customer service training activities that I use. A lot of them are based upon these same types of obstacles that I shared with you today. And for those of you who don't already receive it, I'll send you my customer service tip of the week. It's a one tip via email once a week. It's a way of keeping our skills sharp on an ongoing basis. And the way to receive all of this, just text the word hidden to that number you see on the screen, 66866, and you'll automatically receive it. You'll get a text back just prompting you to enter your email, and you're done. I'll make sure I send all of that to you. So I want to get to the Q&A portion. And what I have now is I've got the chat box, which we've been using, but I also have a Q&A box. So I don't want to make any confusion. You can use whatever you'd like. And I would, we'll we'll try to answer your questions as we go along. All right. One of the questions is, how long do you estimate this webinar to last? But thank you. I appreciate that. So we are wrapping up with the Q&A. What I can promise is that we will not go over an hour. We will go, in fact, a little bit under an hour. So hopefully we've answered that question for you. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite you to ask questions about either the concepts we covered on the webinar today or additional questions that you might have for me about different types of obstacles that our employees might face. So let me be quiet for just a second and let you do that. And I'm going to start thumbing through the some of your comments on chat. Okay. All right. It was more of a comment here, but going back to that last experiment, the people on this webinar today are probably more invested in customer service. We probably will skew higher, and you're definitely right. So there's always a limitation to these types of demonstrations, if you will. But it's I think it's still held up in terms of at least a demonstration, not a scientific experiment. You're right. Okay, so let's look at a few of the questions here. And I'm going to try to answer a few of them, and then if I don't get a chance to answer all of them, then we can, okay, sorry. Then what I'll do is I'll probably post them on my blog. So one of the requests was, can we get that number again? How to get the daily activities and reminders. Here you go. Okay, so one of the questions, how do you deal with a culture on a large scale? So thanks for asking that. I think one of the things that you can do no matter what your scale, whether it's small or large, is you have to define your culture. And one of the ways you define that is what's called a customer service vision. And this is a shared definition of outstanding service that gets everybody on the same page. And the way that that helps us, it's kind of a guide no matter what we do. So as an example, JetBlue, one of the highest rated airlines, that's a pretty big organization. Their customer service vision is inspire humanity. And what that means is no matter where you are in the organization, whatever you do, inspire humanity should be part of your guide in making decisions, dealing with challenging obstacles, etc. That works on a large scale. The challenge on a big scale versus a small scale is you have to be that much more deliberate about making sure the entire organization is working towards that same culture. Because often what happens is every individual department or team leader thinks that they've got their own great idea and they try to kind of create their own thing, and that can erode culture. So it's up to leadership to make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. And that's what customer-focused leaders honestly spend a lot of their time doing. So hopefully I answered that for you, Justin. What are my thoughts on the motivational-based interview? I don't think I'm familiar with that terminology. Can you help me out a little bit with that? I'll come back to your question on what a motivational-based interview is. I'm not sure if I've gotten that one or not. Question is, how much content is the new book? How about a percentage? So I would say that, so the book is comprised of stories, examples, research, and solutions. I would say almost like 75% of the examples, maybe slightly less, are brand new to make them more relevant, more contemporary. The research, I'm building on a lot of the research. So if you already have the first book, Service Failure, there are a few areas of research that I've added to, but fundamentally the research is about the same. So you may want to just hang on to Service Failure rather than investing in the new book. And then in terms of the solutions, I have added a few more solutions, a few additional ones, but that's maybe 10% on that. So hopefully that answers that for you. It's definitely focused on making it more accessible and adding a few more things, but the examples are really where I focused a lot of the new content. Okay, I want to go to the, I've got so many great questions on chat here. Let's see. So I'm going to just kind of pick a few more here. One was from Cheryl, suggestions to keep agents engaged as a company is going through changes. I really like this question because it brings up two hot topics, right? Which is engagement and change we're all dealing with. So engagement, let's start by defining that. Engagement to me, and there's multiple definitions out there, but to me engagement means an employee knows what makes the organization successful and they're committed to helping achieve that. Now, as the organization changes, often what becomes confusing to employees is, well, how does the organization succeed now? Or how do I contribute to that success? And often there's not a lot of transparency with change management. In other words, employees aren't kept abreast, and they certainly aren't kept involved. So one of the best things you can do in terms of change management and keeping employees engaged is involve them in the changes, co-create changes. Like the example I gave you earlier, where managers dream up the policy and then kind of foist it on employees. Get employees enlisted in helping to create new procedures, new policies, new ways of doing things. And as they become part of the change, they take more ownership, they're more engaged because they understand it better. And ultimately, you're going to get a lot more buy-in. Hopefully that answers that question for you. Let's see, I got a few more here. We've done everything to assist our customers and realize the main issue is outside of our software. And we have customers that go from 10 to 100. I'm guessing that means that they're really, really angry. So without fully understanding the thing, I will tell you that I've dealt with similar types of scenarios in the past, and I hope this general approach will help you. I like to work with teams to do what I call a sphere of influence exercise. And what the exercise is, we simply draw a circle like on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. And outside the circle, we write down all the issues that we can't control. Like the one is the main issue is outside of the software. So we write all those things down, and then we write down inside the circle things we can control. So it might be, how do we deliver that message? And we find that if you deliver it this way, people get upset. And if we deliver it this way, it's a little bit more palatable. And maybe we even experiment with that. Maybe one agent has figured out a really good way to suggest something, and that's something we might want to share with everyone else. There's also a thought about, well, if they're always getting confused about this one thing, is there an easier way to present it to them and prevent them from getting confused or doing it the wrong way? Can we find guide rails, if you will, to set up along the way? And often that sphere of influence exercise causes us to realize we can actually influence a lot more than we originally thought, but it takes a little bit of brainstorming to get there. So process over solution jumping is the way I think to resolve that. Okay, let's see if we can get a few more here. I want to go back and see if we answered that one. So Justin asked, kind of a follow-up, is the customer service vision separate from the mission, vision, and values? In an ideal situation, no. The most customer-focused companies, they have chosen one of those mission, vision, and values to also be the customer service vision. And you might hear it even being called different things. So sometimes it goes by the brand promise, our customer service credo. There's so many different names for it. What I'm really suggesting is come up with one thing that is the compass, the North Star when serving customers. Often, unfortunately, if you look at the mission, vision, and values, they don't really have a lot of meaning. And when they don't, then you have to come up with a separate statement. But ideally, you pick which one of those three is most important and you use that as the guide. So there's certainly some overlap to that one. Okay, let's see. Calibration there's a question here about calibration. So I've got time for just a couple more. And again, what I'm going to do is, if I don't get a chance to answer all of your questions, try to go back over them and answer them a bit later on my blog. So thanks for so many questions here. I really appreciate it. So question that, let's see. Oh, I want to answer one on calibration. Nicholas had this calibration. Let's see. Calibration of support to a consistent standard is a really interesting concept. So the question is suggestions on how to calibrate the team. Well, for a lot of you that are in a contact center environment, you probably have like a QA kind of monitoring form, if you will. And there's a few different ways that you can calibrate that. And even if you don't, you start with someone's best example and calibrate that in training. In other words, you're getting the person to self-identify. These are the standards we expect. And this particular call, email, chat, face-to-face interaction, it met all of those standards. And so we're kind of making sure everybody's on the same page that way. The next step you can do to expand it further is to have a team come together and evaluate interaction, face-to-face, over the phone, email, chat, etc. And have everybody kind of score an interaction against a set of standards and say, did this meet our standards? Did this reflect our customer service vision or not? Have each person kind of create their own score or their own evaluation, and then you come together and synthesize them and talk about what are the differences of opinion, perhaps, what are the differences in observation. The goal of the whole exercise, though, is to get everybody to look at the same interaction and everybody come up with the same conclusion. That interaction was right on target, that interaction went above and beyond, or that interaction had some room for improvement. So it's a constant process where you have both the employees involved, leadership, training, et cetera, all working together to come to agreement. This is what our benchmark should look like. So it's kind of an iterative, ongoing process. And I noticed that you have a couple other people had the same question. All right, I never like to keep people too long on a webinar. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to use your questions. I'm going to put them on my blog, and let me show you where my blog is. So if you get my customer service tip of the week, my blog is a separate email subscription. I've got kind of different audiences for both. But if you go to that website, toystersolutions.com/blog, you can sign up via email, and I usually publish Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll publish a recap of this webinar, try to answer any question maybe I didn't get to. And I invite you to interact with me. You can email your additional questions, call or text me, even hit me up on Twitter. I try to be easy to find. So thank you so much for being part of today's webinar. I had fun. It flew by for me. Thanks for being good sports with all of these experiments. They weren't designed to make you feel bad, just help you understand what all of us, including our employees, go through on a regular basis. And the one thing I want to leave you with is when you personally, or maybe one of your employees, is struggling with a particular aspect of customer service, the first instinct sometimes is to think, oh, it's so obvious what they should be doing. But push the brakes on that for a moment and ask yourself, why are they acting that way? What obstacles might be getting in their way? And that process might help you find a solution. And then reach out, as a lot of you suggested with one of my earlier examples, reach out, have that one-on-one conversation with your employee, work together to find a solution, and chances are you probably will. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being on the webinar. Look for the recording, and hopefully I'll interact with all of you soon. Have a great one.